Raul Diaz squinted at the dim glow of his phone, the only source of light in the sudden darkness. Moments ago, the subway car had been rattling along as usual on its tracks, ferrying him to the downtown maintenance hub. Now it was immobilized in the tunnel, lights flickering out due to a citywide signal failure that had plunged the transit line into an eerie blackout. A collective sigh and a few groans echoed through the packed late-night train car. The emergency lights cast long shadows across anxious faces. Raul steadied himself with one hand on the cold metal pole and checked his watch. 11:42 p.m. He was already running late for the overnight systems upgrade he was scheduled to oversee. As a senior software architect for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, he was often on call for technical mishaps. But being trapped on a stalled train was not how he'd expected to spend this night. With a quiet exhale, Raul pulled out his phone again, swiping until Emily's contact appeared. He tapped the screen to initiate a video call, more out of a need for comfort than necessity. Emily, his wife of 8 years, usually waited up for him when he worked late, and she'd want to know he was okay. The phone rang once, twice. Raul braced himself against the window as the train jolted slightly, then stilled again. At last, the screen flickered to life. Emily's face appeared, dimly lit by her own phone's screen. She wasn't at home on the couch as he'd imagined. Instead, behind her, Raul glimpsed what looked like tiled walls and fluorescent lights, perhaps her office corridor or a public space. Her forehead creased with concern when she saw Raul's dim surroundings. "Raul? Are you all right?" she asked softly. He managed a tight smile to mask his frustration. "I'm fine. The whole subway line just lost power. We're stuck in the tunnel just outside Civic Center Station. I wanted to let you know I might be late getting home." Emily's eyes darted off screen for a split second. Raul heard a distant echo through the call. An announcement chime? It sounded like the faint ping of a station loudspeaker. Was Emily at a train station this late? She quickly replied, "Oh, that's terrible. I was worried when you didn't text. Are you safe?" Her tone was warm, but something about it felt distracted. Raul pressed his back against the train wall, trying to get comfortable as the minutes ticked by. Other passengers murmured around him. "Yeah, just bored and stuck. They'll probably get it fixed soon." He paused, noticing that Emily seemed to be glancing around rather than looking at him. "Where are you right now? Still at the office?" The video feed shook slightly as Emily adjusted her grip. Raul could only see her face clearly, framed by wavy chestnut hair. She offered a quick, tight-lipped smile. "I'm about to leave the office, actually. Just wrapping up a few things for that presentation tomorrow." Another garbled announcement sounded in the background on her end. This time, unmistakably the automated voice one hears on a train platform. "Next train arriving in 5 minutes." The words were too distorted to make out fully, but Raul recognized the cadence. His heart gave a curious flutter. Emily worked in a downtown high-rise. He knew it well. There was no train platform in or near her office building that played such announcements audibly. He straightened up, a knot of worry forming in his stomach. "Em, are you at a station? I thought you drove to work today." For a fraction of a second, Emily's face froze. It was there and gone in a flash. The deer-in-headlights look of someone caught off guard. "What? No. Well, I parked near the station, you know. Sometimes I cut through the station to the garage." She spoke quickly, too quickly, her voice echoing strangely. "It's nothing? Are you sure you're okay?" Raul frowned. Emily's explanations didn't make sense. The garages downtown were not connected to the subway. And why would she be near a platform at almost midnight? He opened his mouth to press for clarity, but just then the subway car jolted and the lights blinked back on. Around him, passengers sighed in relief as power was restored just as abruptly as it had died. "Hang on, the train's moving," Raul said, eyes flicking to the window. Indeed, the train had begun creeping forward. Power must have been restored across the line. The crisis was passing. Emily nodded hastily. That's great. Just get home safe, okay? Love you. She sounded eager to end the call. Before Raoul could respond, the screen went dark. Emily had hung up. For a long moment, he simply stared at his reflection in the black screen. Something was off. His wife was nowhere near her office. That much was clear. Why had she lied? As the train picked up speed, rattling toward the next station, Raoul's mind raced faster. He replayed the conversation in his head. Emily's uneasy expression. The background chime. The way she cut the call so abruptly. He felt the first pricklings of dread. There could be innocent explanations. Maybe a colleague needed a late ride home from a station nearby. Maybe she wasn't feeling safe and went to a public place. But his gut twisted painfully. The train screeched to a halt at Civic Center Station, and the doors hissed open. Raoul stepped out onto the platform amid a crowd of weary passengers, but he barely noticed them. He stood off to the side, phone clutched in his hand, trying to quell the rising panic in his chest. Suddenly, the device buzzed. A new call? He glanced down and saw Emily's name flash on the screen. Strange. She was calling him back. Raoul swiped to accept. Hello, Emily? He answered, voice echoing a bit in the now mostly empty station. Most travelers had hurried along, leaving him alone under the harsh LED lights. For a second, he heard nothing but muffled static. Then came a rustling sound, like the phone was in a pocket. He was about to hang up, assuming it was a missed dial, when he heard a whisper that made his blood run cold. I'll meet you at platform 4, like always, Emily's voice said quietly. The tone, the intimacy and urgency in it, was one he hadn't heard directed at him in a long time. Raoul's heart lurched. The sound was faint, as if she was speaking to someone else nearby. A male voice murmured something in response that Raoul couldn't catch, and then there was a click. The call disconnected again. For a moment, Raoul forgot to breathe. The words reverberated in his ears, louder than the screech of any train. Platform 4, like always. He swallowed hard, leaning against a tiled pillar on the platform to steady himself. Platform 4. Every transit station in the city had numbered platforms, usually 2 per station for opposite directions. A few major hubs had more. Platform 4 would be an out-of-the-way spot in most places, possibly a less used side, or perhaps a hidden section if it was a smaller station. But that phrase, like always, implied routine. Habit. A secret meeting place she frequented. Raoul's hands trembled, an icy sickness washing over him. There could be no innocent explanation for what he'd just heard. Emily was meeting someone, a man presumably, at a platform they used habitually. This was an affair. It had to be. The late nights, the odd evasiveness, the way she'd been more protective of her phone lately. All the little signs he'd rationalized away in recent months crystallized in an instant. He felt as though the ground had opened beneath him, swallowing him into the same darkness that had enveloped the tunnel moments ago. Emily, his Emily, the woman he had loved and trusted for years, was cheating on him. A mix of devastation and raw fury rose in his throat. Raoul's mind flooded with questions and denials. Who was she meeting? How long had this been going on? How could she do this to their marriage? He thought of their quiet home in the suburbs, of the anniversary trip they'd taken just last spring to the Grand Canyon, of the gentle kiss she'd given him that morning before work. It felt like looking at a sepia-toned photograph of someone else's life. If what he'd overheard was true, all those moments were now cast under a harsh, deceptive light. A train roared into the station on the opposite side, blasting a gust of wind that whipped at Raoul's jacket. He realized he was still standing frozen on the platform. In a daze, he moved toward the exit. His maintenance shift. He'd nearly forgotten. But protocol demanded he report to the operations center after a disruption like this. The rest of the city's transit grid would be in disarray from the signal failure. Mechanically, Raoul climbed the station stairs 2 at a time, pushing through the turnstile with his employee badge. His jaw was clenched so hard it ached. He needed answers, but right now he had to maintain composure. The city was counting on him and his colleagues to get the trains running normally, and that was the only thing holding him together, this slim thread of duty. On the surface, downtown skyscrapers glittered against the overcast midnight sky. Taxis honked at intersections as stranded travelers sought rides. The signal failure was citywide indeed. The whole transit system had hiccuped, possibly due to a computer glitch or an electrical surge. "I'll figure it out," he told himself, forcing his feet one in front of the other towards the operations building. Fixing problems, technical ones, was second nature to him. Personal problems, though, were far less straightforward. His phone buzzed in his hand, jolting him. Emily again. Raoul's chest tightened. He couldn't speak to her now, not without losing his temper or breaking down. Not here on a busy sidewalk with adrenaline and anguish pounding through him. He declined the call, shoving the phone in his pocket, and marched on. The operations center was abuzz when he arrived. Bright fluorescent lights and the hum of servers greeted him, along with anxious colleagues huddled around monitoring stations. Raoul took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and joined them. He donned the professional mask he'd worn for years, calm, focused, meticulous, suppressing the turmoil inside. As he dove into diagnosing the root cause of the signal outage alongside his team, a part of his mind remained fixated on Emily's words. Platform 4, like always. Those 5 words were a corrosive mantra now, eating away at him with each repetition. While code scrolled on screens and diagnostic alarms beeped in the background, Raoul silently vowed to uncover the truth. He wouldn't confront Emily blindly. He needed proof, something concrete that his logical mind could grapple with. Otherwise, he feared his emotions might devour him whole. Technical confirmation. Raoul barely remembered the taxi ride home in the pre-dawn hours. The subway had been partially back online by 2 a.m., thanks in part to his swift coding fixes and coordination with the signal engineers. The city crisis was averted, but his personal crisis had only just begun. Stepping through the front door of his house, he was greeted by silence and darkness. It was nearly 4:30 a.m., and the suburban street was asleep. As he clicked the door shut softly behind him, he noticed Emily's shoes by the entrance, the low black heels she wore to the office. So she was home. His heart thudded. Had she met her lover at platform 4 after the call and still made it home before him? It was possible. His own work had kept him out for hours after the incident. Perhaps she had only a brief rendezvous. Or perhaps she never went at all, and he was misunderstanding. But no, he had heard her. That whisper echoed in his skull like a taunt. Like always, there was a history to this. Raoul set down his bag and walked quietly through the living room. A single lamp was on in the corner, casting a warm glow on the beige couch and bookshelves. Emily must have left it on for him, as she often did when he worked late. The gesture felt oddly normal and kind, at stark odds with the suspicions gnawing at him. He found her in the bedroom. Emily was fast asleep, curled on her side atop the comforter, still dressed in a blouse and pencil skirt. She looked exhausted, even innocent, a stray lock of hair across her cheek. The sight twisted something in Raoul's chest. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with at 24, the woman who could still light up a room for him, until tonight. Fighting the urge to shake her awake and demand answers right then and there, Raoul instead backed out silently and closed the door. He couldn't speak to her now without evidence or a clear head. Instead, he slipped into the den across the hall, his home office. Soft blue light from his dual monitors bathed the walls as he powered up his computer. This small room had always been his sanctuary, where he planned software architectures and pored over system logs in solitude. Now it would serve a new purpose. His hands were unsteady on the keyboard as he navigated through the Transit Authority's network via the secure VPN. He had high-level clearance, and often remotely accessed system data from home in emergencies. Tonight, he would use those privileges for something deeply personal. First, he pulled up the train signal logs for the time around the citywide failure, partly to ground himself in a task. The failure had originated in a central control router glitch, likely a firmware bug. He scanned the lines of code and timestamps, confirming what he and the team had patched earlier. It was all routine technical data, yet normally he found comfort in the straightforward logic of it. Not now. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Swallowing, Raoul switched over to another set of logs, the security entry logs for Emily's office building. If she claimed to have been at work late, there would be a record of her leaving. His fingers flew, querying the database for her employee ID. Almost instantly, a result. Emily Diaz exit, 10:54 p.m. She had swiped out of her office building's lobby at 10:54, which matched her story of about to leave. So far, nothing odd. He cross-referenced the timing with the transit logs next. If she left at 10:54 downtown, how would she get to a platform 4? Perhaps the station nearest her office. The main downtown station, Market Street Station, was a major hub with multiple platforms for different lines. Yes, Raoul recalled it had at least 5 numbered platforms for various routes. Platform 4 there was used for an older line that had reduced service and was closed off at certain hours. His mind flashed back. Market Street Station's Platform 4 had been partially closed for renovations for months now, with only maintenance access after 9 p.m. Could that be it? Was she meeting someone on that closed platform where hardly anyone would be at night? It made a twisted kind of sense for secrecy. Raoul's jaw tightened as he accessed the station's security cameras. Thanks to system upgrades he'd worked on, many station CCTV feeds were accessible through the central network with the right credentials. He selected Market Street, Platform 4, and scrubbed through footage around 11 p.m. The grainy black and white feed showed the long stretch of concrete platform, eerily empty. The renovations meant no trains were scheduled, and one end was blocked by barricades where construction materials were stored. For a while, the feed showed nothing but the occasional flutter of a piece of caution tape in the stale underground air. Then, at 11:10 p.m., movement, a figure appearing from the far end near the barricades. It was a woman, walking briskly. Raoul's breath caught as she moved under the lights. Emily. The camera quality was poor at that distance, but he knew her silhouette, the way she carried herself. She was alone, glancing over her shoulder as she approached the shadowy construction zone. She wore that same blouse and skirt, now rumpled in sleep in the next room. Raoul felt his eyes burn, anger and hurt swirling. He forced himself to continue watching. Emily paced a little near the end of the platform, checking her watch or phone. She looked anxious or excited, hard to tell. A minute later, another shape emerged from a service door beyond the barricade, a man in a hard hat. The camera's angle only caught him in profile as he stepped onto the platform. He must have come through the tunnels or a maintenance route. The two figures approached each other carefully, then came together in an embrace. Raoul's stomach clenched. Even on the monochromatic video, he recognized the familiarity of that body language. Emily wrapped her arms around the man, and he around her. They held each other for what felt to Raoul like an eternity before finally parting. The man kept a hand on her waist as they spoke face to face, close. Though the camera had no audio, Raoul could imagine their whispers bouncing off the tiled walls. Emily tilted her head up, and the man leaned down to kiss her. Raoul slammed his eyes shut, pain bursting behind them. It took all his willpower not to roar in anguish and wake the whole neighborhood. Hands shaking, he minimized the video feed, unable to watch further, but knowing he had to gather more information. Fury hammered in his temples. Who was this bastard with his wife? The hard hat and access to a maintenance door suggested an employee, perhaps someone from the contractor crews or transit staff. Returning to the logs, he accessed the maintenance worker entry logs for Market Street Station, specifically that service door. Sure enough, An entry was logged around that time. Door SA4, service access 4, opened at 11:08 p.m. by ID hash 7734. Then another log, Dr. SA4. Closed at 11:12 p.m. The time frame matched perfectly. Someone with ID hash 7734 let himself into the area just minutes before Emily arrived and likely left after meeting her. Raoul's eyes narrowed at the ID number. He cross-checked it against the employee database. ID hash 7734 belonged to a Thomas Beck, an electrical technician working the night shift on station maintenance. Raoul recognized the name faintly. He might have seen it on email chains or a project roster. They had never met in person, but this man worked under the maintenance division that coordinated with Raoul's own software team for certain upgrades. Now a horrifyingly clear picture emerged. Emily had been meeting this technician during his night shifts, slipping into closed areas of the subway for secret trysts. The guts of the city's transit system, where Raoul had poured so much of his life's work, had become the very place of his wife's betrayal. His fist curled on the desk. It wasn't enough to have a vague video. He needed to know the extent of this. How long had it been going on? Why? How could she do this to him? To them? They had built a life together, overcome struggles, talked about maybe starting a family soon. And here she was, risking everything in the darkness of a subway tunnel with some stranger. Raoul forced himself to keep digging. He pulled records of that same door usage on previous nights. A pattern jumped out. ID hash 7734 had accessed service door SA4 frequently, at least twice a week, over the past 2 months, always late at night around 11 p.m. to midnight. Often, the logs lined up with days he knew Emily had said she was working late or had a girls' night. The evidence was damning. He searched camera footage for a few of those dates as well, confirming that each time, the grainy figure of his wife would appear on platform 4 shortly after the technician entered. The routine was consistent, almost daring in its brazen repetition. They likely assumed that a closed platform and a maintenance route would be completely deserted and unnoticed. And truthfully, if not for a lucky or unlucky accident of that signal failure stranding him on a train, Raoul would still be ignorant. As he reviewed one of the videos, a flash of motion caught his eye that made his blood boil further. On the footage from just last week after meeting the man, Emily led him by the hand out of the camera's frame, toward a maintenance alcove or perhaps behind the stacks of equipment. They must have sought privacy out of you. They were Raoul slammed a hand onto his desk, the sharp pain in his palm grounding him from imagining the rest. He couldn't watch more. He had seen enough to confirm the affair beyond doubt. Each new piece of evidence was another knife in his heart, twisting deeper. His love had given way to a cold, simmering hatred that surprised even him. Raoul prided himself on being rational and measured, but at this moment, every fiber of his being screamed for retribution. He closed the video feeds and logs, staring blankly at lines of code on his other monitor. On any other night, he might have found solace in the neatness of binary and algorithms. Tonight, they were meaningless. Emily's betrayal was now a part of his reality, as real as the code and systems he mastered. And like a broken piece of code, he felt an overwhelming need to fix this, to correct what had gone wrong in his life. But how? Confronting her outright, with evidence in hand, would be the straightforward approach. She would cry, perhaps apologize or try to justify it. They would have a dramatic fight. Maybe she'd beg forgiveness, or maybe she'd leave. Their marriage would be in shambles no matter what. The thought of even speaking to her now made him nauseous. Her lies, her deceit while playing the part of a devoted wife at home. It was monstrous. Raoul found himself recalling every tender moment of the past weeks and months. The comforting rub of her hand on his back when he was tired, the peck on his cheek as she poured his coffee, the nights curled on the sofa watching movies. all while she held such a secret. It was as though a stranger had been living with him behind Emily's familiar face. He raked a hand through his hair and stood up, pacing the small office. Confrontation felt insufficient. It answered none of the pain roaring inside him. He wanted them to hurt as he hurt. Emily and that lover of hers. They deserved to face consequences for the hell they had plunged him into. Blueprint for betrayal. A dangerous glint flickered in his eyes as a thought took root. He had always been a problem solver, an engineer at heart. When systems malfunctioned, he would debug, isolate the fault, and execute a solution. Here, the malfunction was moral, not digital, but perhaps an engineer's precision could still apply. He stopped pacing and looked back at the monitors, jaw clenched. If Emily had been using his beloved transit system as her personal rendezvous spot, maybe the system could be used against her. She had made Platform 4 her secret playground. Perhaps it was time to turn that playground into a trap. Raoul's mind raced, envisioning the layout of Market Street Station and its connected tunnels. He knew every inch of it from schematics he'd seen at work. Platform 4 was closed off for renovation, but it still had power, lighting, and was connected to other tunnels. There were heavy maintenance doors leading to spurs of old track and equipment rooms. He had remote access to many of the station's controls, lighting, ventilation, and some door mechanisms tied into the centralized network. He also knew the limitations. Not every door was electronic. Many older ones were manual deadbolts that only physical keys could lock. But he recalled that as part of safety protocols, certain fire doors and security gates at stations could be triggered remotely to seal off sections in case of emergencies. They were rarely used outside of drills. A plan began coalescing in his mind, equal parts technical ingenuity and cold vengeance. It started almost as a thought experiment to distract him from the pain. How might one trap a person in a subway station? He mentally listed factors like a checklist. First, isolate the target in a specific location. Second, disable their means of exit. Third, remove any possibility of outside help or escape. He would create, for a short window, a perfect trap where Emily and her lover would be incommunicado and sealed off. They would have each other, or perhaps not even that, if things played out as he imagined. A part of him liked the idea of them both stuck, caught literally with their pants down, facing his wrath or at least a terrifying night. But another part, the one currently drowning in pain, wanted Emily isolated, vulnerable, and afraid. It wanted her lover to abandon her, leaving her utterly alone in the darkness. Raoul realized he had that power. If he timed it right and considered human psychology, he might manipulate events so that Beck would indeed leave her. Perhaps when things go wrong, Beck's instinct as a worker would be to fix the issue or seek help, inadvertently leaving Emily behind. Raoul could ensure that once Beck stepped out, he couldn't get back to her. The logs earlier had shown Beck usually let her in via the service door. If he triggered his trap just after she entered and Beck left that immediate spot, yes, that could work. It was a gamble, but he felt perversely confident. He sat back down, opening up the scheduling system via a secure console. It was an engineer's playground, command line control over various station subsystems for testing and emergency overrides. He had used it countless times to simulate scenarios or to troubleshoot remotely. His fingers flew over the keys as he navigated to Market Street Station. A list of subsystems under its code, STN-MKT, appeared. Lighting, ventilation, gates, emergency exits, Pennsylvania system, etc. Each had commands to query status and execute overrides. Most required elevated clearance. His account, fortunately, was near top level. Logs would record his actions, so he'd have to be careful and cunning to avoid leaving an obvious trace. He began by focusing on the lighting system. The plan forming in his mind was simple but chilling. Plunge Emily into darkness and trap her there. Let her feel the same sense of helplessness and fear he had felt earlier, both literally in the dark tunnel and now figuratively in the dark about his life's most important relationship. let her feel abandoned and alone, as he now surely would in the wreckage of their marriage. The lighting override was straightforward. He could schedule a scripted event to shut off the lights on Platform 4 and its adjacent tunnel at a specified time. But a mere flicker of lights wouldn't hold her. He needed to lock down physical egress points too. Raoul accessed the gate controls next. Market Street had a main concourse with gates that could be closed to seal off the station entrances. There were also smaller security grills at certain hallways, installed for crowd control or to block sections under renovation, like Platform 4. If he was right, the entrance to Platform 4's area might have such a security grill closed during renovations, possibly left open when Beck snuck Emily in, or maybe closed afterward. He should confirm the physical layout. He quickly pulled up the station's blueprint. On one screen, a 2D schematic of Market Street Station's lower level spread out, labeled neatly. Platform 4 was on the east side, accessible by a stairwell that branched off from the main concourse. It had a sliding security gate at the top of those stairs, likely kept locked to prevent passengers from wandering down during construction. Beck likely had a key or code to open it for his work, and for Emily. That gate could be remotely controlled because it was one of the newer installations. Raoul remembered approving its integration for remote operation, though station staff typically used a local switch. Yes, there it was on the interface. Gate 4 East status, closed, manual override by staff. He could override that to lock and keep it locked at will, though he'd have to ensure no alarms went off. Perhaps setting it to maintenance mode temporarily would do the trick. Next, he considered communications. If Emily had her phone, she could call for help once trapped, assuming there was any signal. Deep in the station it might be spotty, but some carriers did have coverage in parts of the subway. There were also emergency call boxes on platforms, though if power was out, those might fail. He scrolled to the PA, public address system, and the wireless network controls. The station had its own Wi-Fi and an internal phone line system. He could disable the wireless, but the phone could still possibly get a weak cell signal from somewhere. However, Platform 4's tunnel was pretty deep and lined with concrete. Chances were cell reception was minimal down there. Still, to be sure, he could also disrupt the signal repeaters in that area. The transit system had installed cellular repeaters in many tunnels for safety and customer convenience. If he cut power, those would die too. Good. The more he thought it through, the more thorough and cold his planning became. He would create contingency upon contingency, leaving no avenue of escape. He also realized he should time the trap carefully. Late at night was obvious, but he needed to pick the perfect moment to catch them in the act and ensure no one else was around. Raoul started scripting the sequence. At 2:37 a.m. the next night, the system at Market Street Station would initiate a localized emergency lockdown on Platform 4. Lights off in that section and its connecting tunnel, the ventilation fans shifting to low power, which would make the silence and darkness even more oppressive, and Gate 4 East, plus any associated fire doors closed and locked. He'd have to override some safety interlocks that normally prevented locking all exits when people were present. It was possible by tricking the system into thinking that section was cleared for a drill. He typed lines of code methodically, injecting comments for himself as if writing just another utility script, except this one was meant to upend two people's lives. As he worked, a quiet voice in his head began to question. What next? What would he do once they were trapped? Was he going to confront them in person during the chaos? Exact some more direct revenge? Or would he be satisfied to watch them panic? Would he let them out eventually? He resumed coding, more resolute. Moral crossroads. The next day passed in a numb haze for Raoul. He moved through morning and afternoon as if observing someone else's life from afar. Every glance at Emily felt like looking at a stranger wearing his wife's face. In the early dawn hours, after finalizing the core of his plan, he had stretched out on the couch in his home office for a brief rest. Sleep wouldn't come. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw images of Emily in that tunnel, entwined with another man. His anger and hurt were a constant throb, dulled only by the cold focus on what he intended to do. When Emily awoke mid-morning, she found him in the kitchen nursing a mug of black coffee. Dark circles underscored his eyes. She offered him a gentle, sleepy smile. "Morning," she said softly, padding over in her robe. "You're up early. Or did you ever sleep?" "Not really," Raoul replied, voice neutral. He didn't kiss her cheek as he might have on a normal morning. Instead, he took a slow sip of coffee, hoping the mug hid the contempt in his eyes. Emily frowned with concern. "You should rest. Last night sounded rough." She reached a hand toward his arm, but he shifted subtly away under the guise of grabbing the sugar jar. Her hand fell back. He shrugged. "There's a lot to handle. Actually," he cleared his throat, forcing a casual tone, "I might need to go back to the operations center tonight. They want me to double-check the network after that failure. Could be a late one again." It wasn't entirely implausible. Major glitches sometimes required follow-up shifts. Still, Raoul braced, wondering if she would show any sign of guilt or relief. Emily bit her lip, a flicker of something in her expression. Was it anticipation? Guilt? It vanished as quickly as it came. "I see. That's unfortunate. But I understand," she said softly. She stepped away to pour herself some tea. "Just don't push yourself too hard, okay?" Raoul only nodded. He felt a bitter taste that had nothing to do with the coffee. If she was eager for him to be out again, it likely meant she intended to meet her lover. Perhaps she had already been planning it. After all, she had whispered to Beck, like always, just last night. No doubt they were itching to see each other to make up for the chaos that cut their rendezvous short. All of this he kept behind a stony face. "I'll be fine," he murmured. The rest of the day was agonizingly normal on the surface. Emily got dressed and went into the office, saying she had that important presentation. Raoul called into work claiming exhaustion and requesting the night off, ironically explaining he needed to recover from the previous night's crisis. His supervisor agreed, insisting he get some sleep. Raoul assured him he would, then spent the day meticulously refining his plan. He double-checked the code for the override, testing it in simulation mode on a different station during off-peak hours, being careful to leave no trace of that test. Satisfied, he scheduled the real event for 2:37 a.m. at Market Street Station's Platform 4. The system accepted the scheduled task without fanfare. To any monitoring software, it looked like a routine maintenance script queued by a trusted engineer. He disguised it with a benign name and attached it to a dummy ticket in the issue tracking system, something only a deeply thorough audit might find suspicious. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds of his home office as Raoul sat at his desk, staring blankly at lines of code after everything was set. In the quiet, his earlier questions returned to haunt him. What exactly was he about to do? Was he really prepared to potentially hurt someone? Hurt Emily? Like this? He clicked open a photo on his desktop, an old candid of him and Emily at a friend's wedding 2 summers ago. They looked so happy, dancing with wild grins. He felt a lump in his throat at the memory of how much he'd loved that woman. How he still, in some twisted way, loved her even now. The realization made his eyes sting with angry tears. If she had once been the light of his life, now she was the source of its darkest moment. As evening fell, Raoul found himself pacing the living room. His heart was a war zone of conflicting emotions. There was the deep, festering wound of betrayal, throbbing with every beat. And there was the sliver of conscience, whispering doubts. Would this revenge truly bring him peace? Or would it make him into something monstrous? Around 8 p.m., Emily called to say she'd be working late at the office to finalize her presentation. It was an almost laughable lie, delivered with such practiced ease that Raoul's grip on his phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "All right," he answered tersely. "Be safe. I'll be heading out soon too." He stood by the window after hanging up, watching the sun sink below the skyline. The moral crossroads lay before him in stark clarity. He could choose a different path, confront her calmly, seek a divorce, try to rebuild his life without descending into vengeance. That might be what a kinder, wiser man would do. A man who still had hope. Raoul realized he had no hope left for this marriage. Emily had seen to that. With a slow exhale, he accepted the darker road. But even on that road, there were turns that could be taken. How far was he willing to go? A leather-bound notebook lay on the side table, something he once used to jot down software ideas. He flipped it open and scribbled furiously, attempting to articulate his racing thoughts. Plan A, trigger the blackout and lockdown, scare them, but restore systems after a short interval. Trap them just long enough to terrify, then let Emily go with only psychological scars. Plan B, trigger a more comprehensive failure, cut all power for an extended period, ensuring utter darkness and isolation for as long as possible. No lights, no communication, perhaps not restore until someone else finds her hours later. The greater the duration, the greater the risk of real harm or panic-induced injury. Plan C, he hesitated even writing this. Arrange a terminal accident. There were deadly possibilities, electrified tracks, oncoming maintenance trains if he misrouted one. He could, in theory, orchestrate an incident that would end her affair permanently. Raoul's pen pressed so hard it nearly tore the page. He stared at those options, heart-hammering. Plan C, he scratched out immediately. He was not a murderer. At least he told himself he didn't want blood on his hands. Not Emily's, and not even that of the man she chose over him. No matter how much rage coiled inside, some part of him recoiled at outright killing. Plan B was tempting in its cruelty. Let them truly feel abandoned and desperate for as long as possible. Yet that, too, gave him pause. If left too long in total darkness, Emily or the lover might injure themselves trying to escape. They could even stumble onto the tracks and... He closed his eyes, dispelling the image. He didn't actually want her dead or permanently hurt. He wanted her to suffer, yes, but not beyond what she deserved. And frankly, he didn't want a death on his conscience. Plan A, then. The measured revenge. Trap them, scare them, maybe rough them up a bit with the environment, but ultimately let them live to remember it. It was still a grave sin he was about to commit. He knew that. But in that moment, Raoul reasoned it was a proportional response to the sin she committed against him. If he was judge, jury, and executioner of their relationship, then tonight would be the sentencing. Emily would face the darkness as he had, both literally and metaphorically. But he would not become a monster who took a life. Decision made, Raoul tore the page from the notebook and fed it to the kitchen shredder. He didn't need any incriminating evidence lying around. By 11 p.m., he set his plan in motion. Before leaving the house, he stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. Emily's vanity table light was on, casting a soft glow. How many nights had he peeked in like this, seeing her peacefully reading or already asleep, feeling a swell of love for his wife? Now the room was empty, neatly arranged, deceptively normal. There was a framed photo on her dresser of them from a vacation in Hawaii years ago. They looked carefree, happy. Raoul forced himself to turn away. There was no room for second thoughts now. He left the house, driving his car a few blocks away to a quiet residential street. There, under the shadow of a large oak tree, he parked and set up his remote workstation, a laptop hooked to his phone's hotspot. If by some chance Emily doubled back to check on him or something went awry, he didn't want to be easily found at home. But he doubted she'd suspect anything. By now, she was likely on her way to meet Beck. Midnight came and went. Raoul kept an eye on the station's CCTV feeds from his laptop. The main public areas of Market Street Station were dark and deserted, gates closed for the night. He flipped through until he found one camera still active overlooking part of Platform 4. Due to the renovation, many cameras there had been disabled or covered, but one remained operational near the tunnel entrance. It provided a partial view of the platform's far end, washed in low emergency lighting. At 12:47 a.m., movement stirred on the grainy feed. Raoul's pulse quickened. A figure was descending the stairs beyond the security gate. Thomas Beck, identifiable by the same hard hat and work vest he'd seen in last night's footage. Beck unlocked the gate and slid it open partway, disappearing from view as he went back up, likely propping it so it wouldn't lock behind him. Preparing for his lady friend, no doubt. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, another figure slipped into view through the propped gate. Emily. Even through the poor resolution, Raoul felt a jolt at seeing his wife creeping into that closed platform, glancing around nervously. She wore a long coat over what looked like one of her nicer dresses, as if she'd taken time to look good for her lover. The thought was like acid in Raoul's veins. He watched as Emily moved toward the far end of Platform 4. Beck emerged from a nook where he'd been hiding and they came together, embracing. Raoul's hand hovered over the keyboard. A torrent of emotions surged, anger, jealousy, a twisted sense of vindication that they had indeed fallen right into his snare. Not yet, he cautioned himself. The script was set for 2:37 a.m., and it was barely 12:55. He had time to let them stew, perhaps consummate their betrayal once more in that tunnel before judgment fell. It galled him to think of them together during this wait, but he swallowed the bile. The blow would be all the more devastating if struck in the heart of their illicit moment. To occupy himself, Raoul double-checked the open command console. All systems were normal for now. His override job was queued and counting down. He also kept an eye on any transit communications. If by chance another issue arose or some unscheduled maintenance crew entered the area, he'd need to abort. This was a delicate dance. Any outside interference could spoil everything or even put unintended people in danger. But the feeds were quiet, and according to the duty roster, Thomas Beck was the only worker assigned in that section at this hour. The minutes crawled by. On the camera, Raoul occasionally saw flickers of movement, shadows indicating Emily and Beck were tucked away, perhaps behind the stacks of equipment at the platform's end. Likely in each other's arms, whispering and kissing. Every time he noticed it, Raoul's fists clenched. He tried not to imagine the details. He focused instead on the small digital clock at the corner of his screen. 2:30 a.m. 7 minutes to go. Raoul's leg bounced with nervous energy as he sat in the dark car. His finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to intervene if needed, though the script would run automatically. His mind raced. Was everything accounted for? What if Emily had second thoughts and left early? What if Beck took her somewhere else? No. She was there. He could see a sliver of her coat when she moved into that camera's limited view. They were still on the platform. For a fleeting moment, a final pang of doubt struck. This was the last chance to call it off. He could still stop the script, walk away from this path. He imagined confronting her tomorrow with divorce papers instead, or exposing the affair to their families, ruining her socially but not physically. Those would be repercussions too. But in none of those scenarios did he feel the grim satisfaction that he craved right now. Some wounds demanded more than a sterile, legalistic response. He needed to see her suffer fear and regret, needed it like air. Raoul inhaled deeply, steadying himself. In the silent car, he whispered, "This is your doing, Emily. Remember that." It wasn't clear if he was trying to convince her or himself. 2:36 a.m. 1 minute. His eyes flicked to the feed one last time. He could make out Emily stepping away from the shadows, perhaps needing a short break from whatever intimacy they'd been engaged in. Beck followed, zipping up his maintenance jacket. They were talking. Emily gestured as if asking something. Beck pointed back toward the stairwell, likely telling her he had to check on something or fetch a tool. Raoul smirked coldly. Perfect. The lover was about to leave her alone, right on schedule. Right on cue, Beck jogged up the platform toward the stairgate, disappearing off camera. Emily waited at the platform's far end, pacing slowly along the yellow safety line. She glanced idly at her phone, lighting her face in the dim. Did she feel any guilt? Any shame at all? Raoul doubted it. Not yet anyway. 2:37 a.m. 2:37. Raoul's laptop screen blinked as the script activated. On the station camera, the few lights still on abruptly cut out, plunging the grayscale image into near total blackness. At the same moment, his console displayed a stream of status messages. Lights, Platform 4, off. Emergency lighting offline, override. Security gate 4 east, closed and locked. Environmental sensors offline. Communications offline. A surge of adrenaline shot through Raoul. It was done. The trap had sprung. His heart pounded as he imagined the scene down below, the sudden gasp of Emily as everything went pitch black, the metallic clang of the security gate slamming shut, cutting off the exit. He wished he could see it in detail. The camera feed was now useless. With power out, it transmitted nothing but darkness. Instead, he had to visualize it. Emily would have yelped in surprise. Maybe she thought it was another city power glitch or a localized outage. Beck, likely halfway up the stairs, would be startled too. Perhaps at that moment, he might even fear a security patrol or some technical failure. Raoul clenched and unclenched his fists, imagining the confusion unfolding. He couldn't hear them, but he played it out in his mind like a scene from a film. Emily, standing still, heart starting to race. Thomas, she might call out, her voice trembling as it echoes in the void. Beck, up by the gate, finding it unresponsive. He pushes at the heavy metal grill that has dropped from the ceiling to seal off Platform 4. What the hell? He mutters. He might radio for help out of instinct, but Raoul's script has jammed the local communications. Static would meet his pleas. Perhaps Beck tries his key on the gate's lock. Manual override? But Raoul had ensured the electronic lock engaged fully, and likely the mechanism wouldn't budge. Beck rattles the gate, maybe shouts, "Emily, it's okay! Stay right there!" I'll go around to the other side and get it open. Raoul allowed himself a thin smile in the dark. Yes, go ahead and try, you bastard. The station's other entries were locked too. He had closed the main corridor fire door that led to this section as well, isolating the entire Platform 4 area. Even if Beck ran for the next access point, he'd find himself similarly blocked. And if he tried to exit to street level to get help, by the time anyone organized a response, hours would have passed. Back on the console, Raoul monitored the timers. He'd set the lockdown to persist for at least 3 hours unless manually lifted. This would guarantee no one got in or out for a good while. The darkness down there would be nearly complete, save for perhaps the faint glow of a phone screen. But he doubted there was cell service in that sealed tunnel. A giddy, horrifying exhilaration swirled in him. He felt powerful, vindicated, like the master of fate itself. It was a sensation he had never experienced in his law-abiding, orderly life. Part of him was almost sickened by how good it felt to unleash this retribution. Another part simply closed his eyes and savored the first taste of justice. Cold retribution. Emily's world vanished into darkness so complete that for a moment she thought she had gone blind. 1 second she had been pacing on the platform, scrolling through her phone as she waited for Thomas to return. The next, the phone was snatched from her hand by a surge of panic and clattered onto the concrete. The screen went black along with every light in the station. She froze, heart thumping in her throat. "Thomas?" Her voice echoed, thin and fearful, down the silent platform. There was no response, only the heavy, stale air pressing in around her. A minute earlier, Thomas Beck had stepped away, muttering that he needed to check on a tripped sensor back near the entrance. They had been in each other's arms only moments before, Emily's cheeks still flushed from stolen passion and the thrill of danger. He'd reassured her it was nothing, just routine, and asked her to wait. So she had idled on the platform, thinking of how crazy this all was, and yet how alive she felt, until the lights went out. Now, with the darkness, came a primal fear. Emily fumbled in the blackness, dropping to her hands and knees to find her phone. Her fingers swept across dusty concrete until they brushed the rectangular device. She pressed the power button. Nothing. The phone had died on impact, or the network was out. Either way, it was useless as a flashlight. A faint mechanical noise echoed from the direction of the stairwell, like metal grinding on metal. The security gate, perhaps? Hope sparked in her chest. Thomas might be at the gate, trying to get it open. Maybe the power outage had triggered an automatic lockdown? Emily took a few tentative steps toward where she thought the stairs were, one hand outstretched in front of her to avoid collisions. "Thomas!" she called again, louder this time. The darkness devoured her voice, distorting it into strange shapes that bounced back from the tunnel walls. Suddenly, a distant thud reverberated through the station, followed by a heavy silence. Emily's breath quickened. That sound didn't inspire confidence. If anything, it felt like a door slamming shut. She tried to recall the station layout in her mind. Platform 4 was down a set of stairs from the main hall. The security gate was at the top of those stairs. If Thomas had gone that way, perhaps he was on the other side of the gate now. Did it close behind him? Her chest tightened at the thought that she might be sealed in. No, that can't be, she reassured herself. Thomas will get help. He has keys, a radio. Emily reached the bottom of the stairwell by memory and feel. Her shin bumped into the first step. Gripping the handrail, she ascended carefully in the darkness. Halfway up, she saw a faint glow from above, the red emergency exit sign, casting just enough illumination to outline the gate. Relief rushed through her. At least she could see something now. "Thomas, I'm here!" she called, pressing herself to the gate. The metal lattice was closed, barred firmly across the opening. Emily wrapped her fingers around the cold steel and tried to shake it. It didn't budge. "Thomas!" she yelled, voice rising with panic. "The gate is stuck!" Through the grid of the gate, she could make out the corridor beyond, lit by that single crimson exit sign. There was no sign of Thomas. Her heart hammered harder. Maybe he'd gone for help or to find a way to override the controls. All right, think. The power was out, maybe citywide again, or just here. If it was just here, Thomas might find a breaker or call Central. If it was citywide, rescue would come eventually, right? And Thomas wouldn't abandon her, would he? She tried to steady her breathing. Fine tremors started in her hands as adrenaline coursed. Minutes passed as she stood at the gate, peering into empty darkness. It was eerily silent. Not even the hum of ventilation fans. Just her own breathing and the dull pound of her pulse in her ears. After what felt like 10 minutes, Emily realized with growing dread that she truly was alone. Thomas had not come back into earshot, and shouting herself hoarse hadn't drawn any response. He must have gone to get help. That was the optimistic scenario. Pessimistically, maybe he had panicked and fled. But no, Thomas cared about her. Surely he wouldn't just run off without at least saying something. Yet, remembering the abruptness of the lights dying and the ominous sounds afterward, Emily could hardly blame him for seeking any exit. She, too, was itching to escape this suffocating trap. She descended the stairs back to the platform, reasoning that there might be another way out. Many stations had multiple exits or connecting service tunnels. Thomas had taken her through a service door beyond the platform once. Maybe that could lead somewhere. Hands outstretched, she inched along the platform edge toward the barricaded renovation zone. Her foot struck a metal toolbox someone had left behind, sending a clatter echoing through the void. Emily yelped at the noise, nerves raw. She forced herself to focus. She found the barricade, a line of plastic fencing and warning signs. Behind it should be the service door to the work tunnels. Yes. Her fingers found the handle of a heavy door set in the tunnel wall, just beyond the makeshift barrier. She tugged, locked. She jiggled it desperately, but it was solid. Of course it was locked, she thought bitterly. Thomas had unlocked it to bring her in, and likely locked it after they entered to avoid being caught. She cursed under her breath. Frustration mounting, Emily pounded on the door, then immediately regretted it. The noise was thunderous in the closed space, and it only emphasized how alone she was. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal, tears pricking at her eyes. This couldn't be happening. Her thoughts raced to Raoul, if he had any idea where she was. But no, he thought she was working late at the office. She had lied to him so effortlessly. The guilt she'd been suppressing for weeks started to seep through the cracks of her fear. What a fool she had been, risking everything for these clandestine meetings, and now here she was literally in the dark. Raoul must be at his operations center right now, probably dealing with this very outage. The thought twisted her insides. He might be frantically working to restore power, unknowingly saving her from her own folly. If he only knew that his wife was the one trapped down here. A sob escaped Emily. She sank to the ground, back against the barricade. God, what if I die here? The notion had lurked since the lights went out, but acknowledging it made it real. The darkness felt suddenly alive with menace, the weight of the entire city above pressing down. She thought of Raoul's smile, of the way he'd kissed her goodbye just yesterday morning. There had still been love in his eyes, love she had disregarded in pursuit of a reckless affair. Why? Why had she done it? Emily buried her face in her hands, tears spilling out. She had been frustrated, lonely, feeling neglected by Raoul's constant work. But she should have talked to him, not run into the arms of another man. Now, in the black emptiness, she understood viscerally what she had thrown away. If she ever saw the sunlight again, if she ever saw Raoul again, could he possibly forgive her? Did she even deserve forgiveness? Time lost meaning. Emily sat huddled, shivering, though the subterranean air was warm and stale. Occasionally, she called out for Thomas, for anyone. Her voice grew ragged and faint. No answer came. Raoul watched the readouts and timers from his laptop, a phantom spectator to his wife's nightmare. It was nearing 4:30 a.m. 2 hours since the trap had sprung. In that time, there had been a flurry of activity on the transit operations channels. Automated alerts from Market Street Station indicated multiple system malfunctions, exactly as he'd orchestrated. He saw that an emergency crew had been dispatched around 4:15 a.m. to investigate unresponsive systems at the station, after Thomas Beck apparently failed to respond to a routine check-in. It gave Raoul a dark satisfaction to imagine Beck fumbling to explain himself when help finally arrived, if the coward even stuck around. According to the logs, power had partially returned to the station. No thanks to Raoul, but to the fail-safes he'd set. At 4:20, limited lighting was scheduled to restore automatically, a contingency he'd built in just in case. That meant the lights on Platform 4 likely flickered back on dimly about 10 minutes ago, and the gates would have unlocked by now. The thought of Emily blinking in the sudden fluorescent glare, tear-streaked and terrified, filled him with grim contentment. It was time to go home. Raoul shut his laptop and started the car. His hands were steady on the wheel, his mind clear for the first time in days. The deed was done. And what came next? Well, he would face it on his terms. He arrived back at his house just before 5 a.m. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten, a pale gray dawn. Raoul entered quietly and went straight to the shower, washing off the sweat and tension of the night. The man in the mirror who met his gaze looked different, harder, eyes colder. A stranger, yet also more himself than he had felt in a long time. No regret, he whispered to that reflection, as if making a vow. He had just finished dressing in fresh clothes when the phone rang. The sound sliced through the silent house like a knife. Raoul calmly picked it up, glancing at the caller ID. It was an unfamiliar mobile number. "Hello?" he answered evenly. There was a hitching breath on the other end, then Emily's voice, small and trembling. "Raoul! Oh, thank God. It's me." He closed his eyes briefly, hearing the raw panic underlying her tone. Emily, he replied, in a tone of surprised concern. What's wrong? Are you okay? A muffled sob. I... Something happened. I'm... I'm at City General Hospital. There was an accident at the station. Her words spilled out disjointedly. Raoul felt a distant twinge in his chest at her distress. It was the first time he'd heard her sound so helpless. He forced urgency into his voice. Hospital? Emily, slow down. What happened? Are you hurt? I got stuck in the subway. The power went out and I was trapped, she cried softly. It's such a blur. I'm not badly hurt, just shaken. They said I was exhausted and dehydrated. Raoul, can you please come? She wasn't physically injured, just traumatized. He allowed himself a moment of genuine relief. He hadn't wanted her actually harmed beyond fright. I'm on my way, he said firmly. Which hospital room? Who is with you? There was a hesitation. Room 614. I'm here with a friend. Her voice faltered on the word. No doubt Thomas Beck had accompanied her, at least until doctors took over. A friend? Raoul echoed, tasting iron as he bit the inside of his cheek. He kept his tone neutral. Never mind, I'll be there as soon as I can. He hung up, heart thrumming with adrenaline once more. So, she had been rescued and taken to the hospital. And Beck was with her, presumably posing as a concerned colleague or friend. The nerve of that man. Raoul grabbed his keys again and headed out. The early morning traffic was sparse, and City General was only a 15-minute drive. As he navigated the streets, his mind rehearsed the role he must play now, the worried, unsuspecting husband. In truth, a seed of conflict bloomed inside him. Hearing Emily's broken voice had stirred love and concern that he thought were long dead. Part of him, some vestige of the old Raoul, wanted to rush to her, cradle her, tell her everything would be all right. But the new Raoul, forged in betrayal and revenge, held that impulse in check with an iron grip. This was not over yet. He needed to see her face when she realized that he knew. He craved that confrontation almost as much as the trap itself. Raoul found Emily's room in the ER's observation wing. He paused at the door, schooling his features into an expression of anxious relief. Then he pushed it open. Emily sat propped on a hospital bed, pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her eyes were red-rimmed and haunted, her hair a tangled mess about her shoulders. She still wore the now dirty dress and had a blanket around her. An IV line trailed from her arm. In a chair by her side sat a man, Thomas Beck, identifiable now that Raoul could see him clearly. Early 30s, with a lean build and short sandy hair. He was out of his work gear, wearing jeans and a jacket, likely given to him after he changed out of his uniform. A small bandage was stuck to his left temple. Perhaps he'd gotten a minor knock in the chaos. At Raoul's entrance, Emily's gaze snapped up. Raoul, she breathed, tears immediately pooling anew. In that single word was an ocean of emotion. Guilt, shame, desperation. Thomas stood awkwardly, eyes darting between husband and wife. You must be Raoul. I'm Thomas. I was with her when it happened, he offered, stumbling over the explanation. Raoul ignored the man entirely and crossed to the bed. He took Emily's hand gently in his, noting how she trembled. I got here as fast as I could. I'm here now, he murmured, brushing a knuckle against her cheek in a show of comfort. Her skin was cold and clammy. She gripped his hand as if it were a lifeline, fresh sobs shaking her. Raoul, I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. He tilted his head, feigning confusion. Sorry? Shh, it's all right. You're safe, that's all that matters. The lie tasted bitter, but was necessary. Emily glanced at Thomas, who had stepped back a bit. Thomas, thank you for staying with me, she said softly. The implicit dismissal in her tone was clear. Thomas cleared his throat. Of course. I'm just glad you're okay, Emily. He shot a wary look at Raoul. The doctor said you'll be fine, just need rest. So I should probably go and file the incident report with my supervisors. He hesitated, then added awkwardly, Again, I'm really sorry about all of this. I don't know what went wrong with the system. Oh, but I do, Raoul thought, suppressing a smirk. He allowed himself to meet Thomas's eyes then. In a level tone, he said, Thank you, Thomas. It's fortunate you were there when everything failed. I'm sure the transit authority will get to the bottom of it. Thomas visibly flinched at that last comment and quickly gathered his things. He gave Emily one last concerned look. Get well, okay? Emily nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Raoul watched her. She looked ashamed and anxious in front of her lover now that her husband was beside her. Good. With that, Thomas Beck slipped out of the room, leaving the married couple alone. The moment the door closed, an oppressive silence fell. Emily withdrew her hand gingerly from Raoul's, wiping at her tears. Raoul, I have to tell you something, she began haltingly. He stood at the foot of her bed, arms crossed. The sight of her frail and frightened might have softened a lesser resolve, but Raoul remembered the image of her wrapped in another man's arms. He said nothing, letting her squirm in the silence. She swallowed hard. Thomas and there's no easy way to say this, but I haven't been honest with you. Her voice caught and she squeezed her eyes shut, gathering courage. I've been seeing him. Outside of work. It's my fault. All of it. I'm so sorry, Raoul. Hearing her speak the truth aloud brought a flush of heat to Raoul's face. Even expecting it, it hurt. 8 years of marriage, and this was how it unraveled. He uncrossed his arms and slowly approached the bedside. Why? He asked softly. Not accusatory, just a simple question that contained multitudes of pain. Emily sobbed once into her hands. I was stupid. I felt lonely and you were always so busy. I made a horrible mistake. Thomas. He paid attention to me, and I don't know. I convinced myself I deserved some happiness too. It sounds so selfish and awful now. I never meant to hurt you. Raoul nodded, a strange calm descending on him. You never meant to hurt me, he echoed. But you did. She looked up at him, her eyes glassy. I know, and I can never undo it. But please, if there's any chance... I love you, Raoul. I never stopped. I was just lost. A bitter laugh escaped his throat before he could stop it. Love? Is that what you call meeting another man in a subway after midnight? Was it love whispering sweet nothings on platform 4? Emily stared at him in shock. He saw realization dawn in her expression that he knew far more than he'd let on. Her lip quivered. How did I know? He finished for her, voice dropping. He stepped closer, looming over her bed. I heard you, Emily, last night on the phone. Platform 4, like always. She gasped softly, one hand covering her mouth. He continued, inexorable. I saw you too. On the security cameras. I watched you meet him, embrace him, night after night. I mapped out every lie you told and where you really went. His words were cold, each one striking like a lash. Emily crumpled as though the bed had swallowed her, tears spilling anew. Raoul, He cut her off, his voice rising, unable to keep the aid of calm any longer. Do you know what it's like to be betrayed like that? To have the person you cherish make a fool of you over and over? He shook his head, jaw tight. Of course you don't, because you were the one down there in the dark with him, betraying me without a second thought. Please, she wept. I was wrong. It was a horrible, horrible mistake. She reached out as if to touch his arm, but he stepped back. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary, Raoul snarled quietly. This was a choice, a series of deliberate choices. He exhaled, trying to rein in the rage. Losing control now could ruin what he needed to say. Emily was trembling violently. Whether from the aftermath of her ordeal or from fear of the man before her, it was hard to say. She whispered, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I won't even ask for it. But are you going to leave me? Raoul fell silent. The question hung there. Was he going to leave? In truth, he already felt like he'd left her in that tunnel, abandoned her just as she'd abandoned him emotionally. There's nothing left between us to salvage, he said at length, voice hollow. After what you've done, what we've both done, there's no going back. Emily's brow furrowed, catching the implication. Both done? What do you mean? He held her gaze, the final revelation poised on his tongue. Should he tell her? Confess that the nightmare she endured wasn't an accident at all? That it was his hand on the switch? In her eyes, he saw genuine bewilderment cutting through the guilt and grief. She truly hadn't considered the possibility that it was orchestrated. To her, it was a freak accident that coincided with her sin. Perhaps she even considered it cosmic punishment. Raoul realized he could leave it at that, a dark coincidence that scared her straight. But that didn't satisfy the part of him that wanted acknowledgement for what he'd done. He wanted her to know this was no random misfortune, it was his justice. Leaning in, he spoke softly, almost gently. Who do you think engineered that accident? Emily's eyes widened, confusion and shock warring on her face. What? What are you saying? I'm saying, Raoul whispered, that the same man who watched you cheat decided to make sure last night would be a night you'd never forget. Her lips parted in disbelief, a horrified understanding dawning. Raoul, no, that can't. You? You did that? Her voice was barely above a breath, as if the truth was too terrifying to speak aloud. He straightened, watching the realization hit her like a blow. Her face went ashen. You locked me in, she moaned, hands flying to her mouth. My God, you could have killed me. But I didn't, he replied sharply. If I wanted you dead, you would be. I made sure you'd live, albeit scared out of your wits. Emily began to sob, a mixture of terror and sorrow. Raoul, how could you? How could I? He snapped, a sudden surge of emotion flooding out. How could you, Emily? How could you throw everything away and expect me to just take it? I gave you my love, my trust, and you left me in the dark. So I returned the favor. She was shaking her head repeatedly, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. This is insane. You're scaring me. He felt a stab of pain at that. Once, he'd sworn he would never be a source of fear for her, only safety and love. That man was gone. Good, he said bitterly. You should be scared. What happened down there was me making sure you felt just a fraction of what I felt. Emily looked around helplessly, as if the antiseptic walls might offer an escape. Finding none, she turned pleading eyes on him. I understand you're hurt, but this is wrong, Raoul. It's not you. The man I love would never hurt anyone like this. He let out a cold laugh. The man you love? You mean the fool who was too blind to see his wife sneaking around? Don't pretend you cared about that man when you were with him. He jerked his chin toward the door, indicating Beck's absence. She crumpled forward, elbows on knees, face in her hands. I do care. I do. I'm sorry, she kept repeating between sobs. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could take it back. Raoul watched her, feeling oddly detached. The confrontation was not as triumphant as he had imagined. He thought he would savor her apologies, maybe even feel pleased at her misery. Instead, he just felt empty, tired. He pulled a chair up and sat down. She flinched slightly, peeking at him from between her fingers. He spoke quietly. I'm not going to hurt you, Emily. Not anymore. She lowered her hands slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. Well, what happens now? He glanced at the IV in her arm, the monitor softly beeping. It struck him that she looked small and fragile, like the Emily he'd first met, when they were young and full of bright hopes. Except now, the hope was replaced by dread. Now, he said, we end this farce. I'll arrange for a lawyer. We'll file for divorce as soon as you're able. As for what happened at the station, well, you can tell the investigators whatever you want. He shrugged. It won't change the outcome. Emily searched his face. You're going to jail. If they find out. This is serious, Raoul. Tampering with the subway system. Someone will figure it out. Her tone held a strange mix of fear for him and fear of him. Maybe, he acknowledged. In truth, he expected an inquiry to eventually trace anomalies in the system to his account. He hadn't been as careful covering his tracks as he could have been. Some part of him didn't care, perhaps even wanted to face the consequences head on. I'm prepared for that. She reached out suddenly and gripped his forearm. No, I don't want that. For all the pain I caused you, I never wanted to ruin your life. This will destroy your career, your freedom, everything. Raoul met her eyes. My life as I knew it was destroyed the moment I heard you whisper to him. Everything after that? He gestured vaguely. I had nothing left to lose, Emily. She burst into fresh tears, murmuring apologies and regrets. He let her cry, offering no comfort beyond his presence. His mind drifted to what might come next. Interrogations, trial perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd get lucky, and his act of vengeance would slip through the cracks of bureaucracy for a time. But even if so, his marriage was over, and life as he'd known it was irrevocably altered. A knock interrupted their miserable tableau. A nurse peeked in to check on the patient. Raoul rose to give them space, telling Emily quietly, "We'll talk more later." She nodded listlessly, spent. In the hallway, Raoul leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Every muscle in his body felt drained now that the adrenaline had subsided. He'd done it. He had paid her back in kind. There were no winners here, only varying degrees of loss. Aftermath. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Raoul stood in a courtroom wearing an ill-fitting suit and handcuffs. The state had pressed charges swiftly once transit investigators uncovered evidence of deliberate sabotage in the station systems. A thorough audit had traced the override script to Raoul's user account and workstation. Confronted with the data, Raoul had not bothered denying it. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts: criminal endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, and unauthorized access of computer systems, among others. Emily had fulfilled her promise. She hadn't tried to bury him. In fact, she'd given a statement owning up to her affair and attesting that Raoul's actions, while extreme, came from a place of emotional trauma. It didn't absolve him legally, but perhaps it swayed the judge toward some leniency in sentencing. In the front row of the courtroom, Emily sat with shoulders hunched, her face drawn with remorse and sorrow. Their divorce had been finalized quietly a week ago. Now she watched as her former husband awaited his punishment for the crime that had also been, in a way, her own doing. Thomas Beck was notably absent, fired from the transit authority and keeping his distance from the public proceedings. The judge read out the sentence. 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 3 for good behavior. A heavy price, yet less than it could have been. Federal authorities had initially wanted to throw the book at him for transit sabotage, but the unique personal circumstances and lack of serious physical harm to any party kept it in state court with a more modest term. As the guards led Raoul away, he caught Emily's eye one last time. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," tears slipping down her cheeks. He offered her a faint, ironic smile. In that moment, he realized he felt no hatred toward her anymore, only a distant sadness for what had been and what could never be again. Outside the courthouse, a reporter called out, asking if he regretted what he'd done. Raoul paused as the guards gently tugged him forward. He answered loud enough for everyone to hear, voice steady and clear. No regrets. And in his heart, despite everything, the loss of freedom, the end of a marriage, the uncertain road ahead, Raoul knew he meant it. His life would carry the scars of that night in the tunnel, but he would carry them with his head held high. In the darkness, he had found the truth, and for that, he would never apologize.